¿Tienes? La regué. Me sigue el cartel.
You're no soldier. Give it to me!
This film is about a farmer who has to face gangsters to protect a child. Before we start to discuss, let's support this channel by subscribe. Thank you. At the beginning, we are shown a child named Miguel and a beautiful mother named Rosa. They look peaceful and happy. But everything changed when a call came in and made Rosa worried. The call was from Carlos, Rosa's younger brother, who told Rosa to run immediately because there was a group of gangsters heading to her house.
Vamos a encontrar.
In another place, an old man named Jim targets a wolf that is preying on his livestock, accompanied by his beloved dog named Jackson. At that time, Jim saw several illegal immigrants crossing his farm to get to the border. Jim then reported this to the border police.
About a half-mile from the fence. Over.
It is known that Jim experienced bankruptcy and economic crisis because of his wife's very large medical expenses, even though her wife eventually died. He needed money. So Jim finally looked for work on a road construction project to his friend, Rhonda, as project leader there. However, because there were already so many workers at that time, Rhonda could only accept Jim to work on the next project. In the afternoon, when Jim lowered the flag, a bank officer came and gave him a letter announcing the confiscation of his farm in 90 days because Jim had not paid his loan installments for 6 months. Jim tried to sell his livestock, and it turned out that his livestock were also priced very cheaply.
You decide, buddy.
All of this made Jim stressed, and finally he stopped at a cafe to calm down, and a moment later a woman named Sarah arrived. Sarah is Jim's stepdaughter. Sarah is a border police officer. Sarah patiently listened to Jim's complaints and took her father home. Next morning, at the border of the United States and Mexico, Rosa and Miguel are seen being escorted by a broker who will help them cross the border. Because there is a gap in the guardrail that can be passed through. While passing through the gap, Rosa's foot got caught in the fence and was injured. Miguel, who ran into the street, was almost hit by Jim's car. From across the guardrail, the cartel gang came and asked for the 2 immigrants. But Jim refused, so the shooting action could no longer be avoided.
You're no soldier. Give it to me! Hands. Just taking heavy fire.
Jim managed to shoot one of them. He was Mauricio, Rico's younger brother, the boss of the cartel gang. Rosa, who was shot in the stomach, could no longer stand it, gave Jim the address of her cousin who was in Chicago and asked Jim to take her child there. Rosa finally died. Mama! Then the border patrol team came to evacuate Rosa and took over Miguel. Miguel was finally sent to a shelter for minors without guardians in Dongala. Next day, Jim, who had slept that night in front of the Arizona border post, saw a bag which had stacks of money belonging to Rosa. Jim immediately leaves with that money. But halfway through he remembered Rosa's last request to look after her child, and Jim turned around again. He heard the officer say that Miguel would be deported to Mexico, so Jim took him aside and ran away knowing that Miguel's life was threatened by the cartel gang. Jim will go home to get his things, but he lost Miguel, who apparently tried to escape, and after finding Miguel back,
They send you back. Those men are there waiting for you.
He convinced Miguel to stay with him because the cartel's gang would kill him. Jim also said that he would accompany Miguel to Chicago, in accordance with the request of his late mother, Rosa.
Vamos a cruzar.
Meanwhile, the cartel arrived in America using a fake passport. Cartel came to the Jim's house and took several items that were considered important, including the Jim's honorary star, and immediately set the house on fire. Jim using credit card, and it was traced by the cartel gang. Because Jim didn't know the way, he bought a map for directions to the address given by Rosa. He finally contacted his daughter Sarah to inform her about the whereabouts of Miguel, who was currently threatened with being killed by the person who killed his mother. Then Jim and Miguel proceed their journey. And also Jim's beloved dog, Jackson. Rico, the boss of the cartel, did not stop to look for Jim and Miguel. And his cartel people detected Jim's location and informed his boss that Jim had just stopped at a gas station and shopping at a mini-market. And immediately they chased Jim. On the way it turned out that Jim's car was overheating and finally he had to stop to repair the car. And again, Jim paid for car repairs using his credit card again. So he was tracked again by a cartel gang. On the road Jim was stopped by local police officers without any violations at all. Jim saw something odd when the police made a call to someone, absolutely. A moment later there are some cars approaching, and Jim was forced to paralyze the officer, then they moved away and watched them from a distance. Startling. The cartel gang shot the police because it was deemed incorrect information. On the other hand, the cartel gang's men looked at Jim's map that had fallen in the previous area. And there he saw a marked area. And then Rigo told his men to move towards the border. Meanwhile, the relationship between Jim and Miguel was getting closer. He taught Miguel how to shoot, and he also gave advice to Miguel to become a better son.
Nothing that feels good.
And later, Jim gave Rosa's money to Miguel, but Miguel refused it. He said that the money was not his but belonged to the cartel gang. More surprising was that Miguel decided to burn the money. Finally, they continued to Chicago, and at that time the cartel gang members saw Jim's car entering their area. Jim realized it tried to avoid the usual road. But this cartel gang saw them and immediately chased them. Considering that the condition of the game car was not very good and it was getting overheat, Jim decided to stop and wait. Then the cartel car rolled over after Jim shot the driver. Jim ran to a plantation building, and with injuries the cartel gang continued chasing him until gunfire broke out. It turns out that Rigo managed to catch Miguel and threatened to kill him. Then Rigo and Jim fought with their bare hands. Jim looked overwhelmed, then Miguel shot carelessly, which in the end, the cartel boss was able to paralyzed by Jim. He finally gave Jim's star honorary back. Then Jim left the cartel boss with a gun containing 1 bullet and told him to make a choice. After that, they went to Rosa's family house in Chicago and handed Miguel over, and before leaving Jim gave Miguel his honorary star as a keepsake. The message we can take from this movie is, don't be greedy, because greed will only bring destruction yourself. See you in the next video. Stay healthy and keep smiling.